Okay, so picture this. It's 50,000 BC. The sun just went down. You're sitting around a fire with a bunch of other people. Nobody has a phone. Nobody has Netflix. Nobody has anything, honestly. Just you, the flames, and a thick cloud of smoke blowing directly into your face. And at some point, one of your ancestors looked at that smoke and thought, what if I did that on purpose? This is the story of how humans discovered smoking. Not cigarettes, not cigars, not the coworker outside the building you always end up talking to for 15 minutes. We're talking about the very first time a human being inhaled something, burning, on purpose. And here's the thing nobody tells you. It is so much older than you think. Smoking doesn't start with tobacco. It doesn't start with colonial trade routes or Native American ceremonies or even farming. The desire to inhale smoke might be built into us so deep that it predates civilization entirely. And the evidence for this is genuinely wild. Let's start with fire. The oldest evidence of humans using fire on purpose goes back roughly 1 million years. A cave in South Africa called Wonderwork Cave. Archaeologists found burnt plant ash and charred bone inside the cave. Not from a wildfire, from a contained, deliberate fire that someone built and maintained 1 million years ago. The humans doing this weren't even technically us. That was Homo erectus, our earlier cousin. Smaller brain, heavier brow, and absolutely no interest in being told what to do. But they sat around fires every single day. They cooked, they stayed warm, and they breathed smoke constantly for hundreds of thousands of years. Every human and pre-human ancestor who sat near a fire was inhaling smoke. It was just the air. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all smoke is the same. When you burn organic material, you don't just get carbon dioxide. You get a whole cocktail of compounds depending on what's burning. Some plants, when they catch fire, release psychoactive chemicals, compounds that interact with your brain in ways that are, let's say, noticeable. In other words, some of our ancestors were accidentally getting high around the campfire, and they had absolutely no idea why the evening suddenly felt so good. This is not a fringe theory. Researchers have been saying for decades that early humans living in forested environments would have regularly been exposed to the smoke of psychoactive plants. Cannabis, wild tobacco relatives, various other plants that grow naturally across Africa, Europe, and Asia. And here's the crazy part. The human brain has receptors that respond to cannabinoids. These receptors didn't evolve because of cannabis. They're part of a whole system in your body that regulates mood, memory, and appetite. But the fact that they exist means that when a human first inhaled smoke from a burning cannabis plant, their brain didn't panic. Their brain said, "Oh, hello, I've been waiting for you." That first accidental hit of psychoactive smoke around a prehistoric campfire might be where this whole story begins. Not a decision. Not a plan. Just a very pleasant accident that got repeated enough times that someone eventually thought to recreate it on purpose. Think about what that means. The entire global tobacco industry, centuries of ritual, thousands of years of shamanic tradition, medical practices, social customs, all of it might have started because a tired hunter sat downwind of the wrong bush and had a genuinely excellent evening. History is absurd, and I love it. Now let's talk about what we can actually prove. The oldest direct evidence of intentional cannabis use goes back to around 500 BC, a burial site in the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia. Archaeologists found wooden braziers containing superheated stones and residue from cannabis plants with unusually high THC content. Not wild cannabis used for rope, the good stuff, placed inside a ritual burial. That's 2,500 years ago. But here's the question you should be asking. Does the fact that we haven't found older evidence mean it didn't happen earlier? Or does it just mean we haven't found it yet? Organic material almost never survives thousands of years in the ground. We find stone tools from 3 million years ago because stone doesn't rot. But a leather pouch full of dried herbs? Gone in a few centuries. A wooden pipe? Dissolved back into the earth long before any archaeologist showed up with a trowel. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Not even close. There's also the Herodotus problem. Herodotus was an ancient Greek historian writing in the 5th century BC. He described a group of nomadic people called the Scythians performing what he called a vapor bath. They set up small enclosed tents, heated stones until they glowed, threw hemp onto those stones, then sat inside breathing the smoke, and according to Herodotus, they were howling with pleasure. For centuries, historians assumed he was exaggerating, making things up, doing historian stuff. Then archaeologists started digging up Scythian burial mounds, and they found bronze braziers, heated stones, hemp residue, exactly what Herodotus described. The man was just reporting what he saw. If anything, he undersold it. Now let's talk about tobacco specifically. Tobacco is native to the Americas. That matters a lot, because it means Europe, Africa, and Asia had zero knowledge of tobacco until contact with the Americas in the late 1400s. When Columbus arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, he immediately noticed something strange. Indigenous people were walking around with small glowing sticks, inhaling smoke from burning dried leaves and blowing it back out through their noses and mouths. His crew was baffled. His crew also tried it within weeks, because of course they did. But tobacco use in the Americas goes back way further than 1492. Archaeological evidence, actual chemical residue found in ancient pipes, dates tobacco use in the southeastern United States to at least 3,500 years ago. Some researchers think it could go back 10,000 years or more. And here's something important. In ancient America, tobacco was not recreational, not primarily. It was sacred. Tobacco was used in healing rituals, in communication with the spirit world, in binding agreements between tribes. Blowing smoke on someone was an act of blessing. A shaman who smoked wasn't taking a break. He was opening a channel between the living and the divine. The smoke itself was considered a living messenger, carrying prayers upward, bringing visions back down. When something is sacred, you treat it carefully. You don't chain smoke it on your lunch break. The idea of tobacco as a casual, everyday habit is an almost entirely European invention, and a pretty recent one. In 2019, researchers found something remarkable in the Great Salt Lake Desert in Utah. A hearth, a fire pit roughly 12,000 years old, containing seeds of a wild tobacco species. Not seeds that blew in by accident, concentrated, deliberately placed 12,000 years ago. This pushed back the possible timeline of tobacco use in the Americas by thousands of years, and it raises a bigger question. If people were throwing tobacco into fires 12,000 years ago in Utah, what were people doing with their local psychoactive plants at the same time in Africa and Asia and Europe? Because 12,000 years ago, humans were everywhere, and the desire to alter consciousness is not an American thing. It's a human thing. There's a theory in anthropology called the intoxication hypothesis. The basic idea is this. Across virtually every human culture ever documented, people have found ways to alter their consciousness: fermented drinks, psychedelic mushrooms, smoke, chewed leaves, seeds. This behavior is so universal and so independent across different cultures that some researchers believe it isn't accidental, it's biological. A researcher named Ronald Siegel proposed in the 1980s that the pursuit of intoxication is basically a fourth drive, right alongside hunger, thirst, and sex, hardwired into animal behavior. Not just human behavior. Elephants deliberately seek out fermented fruit. Reindeer in Siberia eat psychedelic mushrooms, and then drink the urine of other reindeer who ate the mushrooms because the psychoactive compounds pass through intact. Reindeer doing drug recycling? Genuinely impressive. The point is that if the drive to alter consciousness is this deep and this old, it makes total sense that early humans, long before they farmed anything or had pottery or pipes, were deliberately exposing themselves to smoke from certain plants because they had figured out through experience that it changed something. In their mind, they learned which smoke made you feel good, which smoke made you feel like you were dying. They remembered, they told others, they passed it down, not through books, through lived experience around fires in the dark. That's how almost all human knowledge worked for most of human history. Smoking is also medicine, and this part rarely gets mentioned. One of the oldest medical documents we have is the Ebers Papyrus from ancient Egypt. Around 1550 BC, it describes treatments involving the inhalation of smoke from heated herbs, specifically for conditions affecting the throat and lungs. Ancient Egyptian doctors prescribed smoke inhalation for lung problems, which sounds insane from a modern perspective, but stay with me. The specific herbs they used had real pharmacological properties when inhaled. The ancient Greeks did this too. Hippocrates, the guy you name a medical oath after, wrote about inhaling herbal vapors to treat disease. The thinking was actually logical by the standards of the time. Smoke reaches the lungs directly. If the plant has medicinal properties, inhaling it delivers them straight to where you need them. We still do this. Asthma inhalers, anesthetic gases, nebulizers. The delivery method survived. The burning part mostly didn't. Ancient Indian medicine dating back over 3,000 years describes a practice called dhumapana, literally meaning smoke drinking. Specific herbs, specific conditions, specific pipes. This was a sophisticated medical system with centuries of refinement behind it. Across ancient China, ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Greece, ancient India, everywhere you look in early civilization, there is evidence of people inhaling smoke on purpose for therapeutic reasons. As a recognized medical practice, there's also something about smoking that doesn't get talked about enough: social bonding. Humans evolved in groups. Group cohesion was life and death for most of our history. Isolated people died. Groups survived. Anything that built trust and connection between people had real survival value. Shared rituals are one of the most powerful tools for social bonding that exist. When a group of people go through a shared experience together, especially an altered one, it creates a sense of connection that's very hard to replicate any other way. Modern neuroscience has confirmed this. Shared rituals synchronize neural activity. They increase trust. They deepen group identity in measurable ways. So when ancient humans sat together in a closed space breathing in smoke from burning plants and collectively entered an altered state, that wasn't just a party. That was social infrastructure. That was how you built the kind of deep trust that let you go into dangerous situations together and come back alive. The ritual smoke circle was technology. Now here's the uncomfortable part of the story. The transition from sacred smoke to mass market product is historically a disaster. When tobacco arrived in Europe in the 1500s, it spread at a speed that should sound familiar. Within decades, it had gone from exotic curiosity to continental obsession. By the 1600s, it was being traded globally. By the 1800s, cigars were everywhere. By the early 1900s, the industrially manufactured cigarette had been invented. Cheaper, more convenient, and more addictive than anything that came before. What took indigenous Americans thousands of years to incorporate into a careful, measured, deeply ritualized practice was turned into a mass-market consumer product within 4 centuries, and then in the 20th century, the tobacco industry spent decades and billions of dollars hiding evidence that cigarettes caused cancer. Evidence their own scientists had gathered internally. They marketed cigarettes to children. They hired doctors to endorse their products. They added chemical compounds specifically engineered to make nicotine hit faster, harder, and leave the system more quickly, maximizing addiction on purpose. A shaman in 500 BC, placing cannabis on hot stones in a ritual burial, and a tobacco executive in 1960, signing off on marketing cigarettes to teenagers were both working with smoke. Almost nothing else about them was the same. The distance between those two people is one of the larger moral chasms in human history. So, when did humans start smoking? The honest answer is, we don't know exactly. We probably never will. The physical evidence takes us back 12,000 years. With confident, reasonable speculation pushes it much further. The underlying drive, the desire to alter consciousness, to share ritual, to use inhaled substances as medicine, is almost certainly older than any artifact we have ever found. It may be as old as fire itself. What is absolutely clear is this. By the time the historical record begins, in every corner of the world where humans lived, they were already finding ways to put smoke into their bodies. The specific plants changed, the rituals changed, the reasons changed, but the behavior was already ancient by the time anyone thought to write it down. There's something almost poetic about that. For all the ways modern humans are different from our ancestors, the technology, the medicine, the internet, the completely baffling amount of content we consume every single day, there are these thin threads running unbroken through 100,000 years of human experience. Fire, smoke, breath. The oldest humans sat around fires and breathed the same air you'd smell at a bonfire tonight. At some point, they started paying attention to what that smoke was doing to them. And then they started choosing it. And then they passed that choice down to their children and their children's children, and eventually all the way to us. Next time you catch a whiff of wood smoke on a cold night, you're participating in something older than you can really imagine. You're doing exactly what humans have always done. You're breathing